So how this happens is something like this then. So you have a child, and maybe they have a history in the family of brain or of dyslexia or reading problems or not. But that child comes to school, right? That brain is, we'll say, a little bit different. They get business as usual instruction in teaching, in reading, and that child struggles because the reading method of teaching doesn't provide that child with what he or she needs. Okay, so what they need is a restructuring of the reading process so that it starts to mimic what occurs for what we know about typically developing readers.
Right.
Okay, so we'll talk about it something like that then. So think of it this way, okay? Right here there's a line here. So this line here is the borderline. Above it is the visual part of reading, letters. Below it is the sounds. So this area we'll call phonics. This area we'll call prephonics. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it is this prephonics area that started to open up with the research on phonemic processing. That's what phonemic processing means. The ability to manipulate those phonemes at that very fine sublexical level of speech. If a child cannot do that, and those children, the 35% who struggle, can't do it to some extent then even phonics instruction, which is fairly direct, doesn't work very well for them because they do not understand the relationship between the visual thing, the letter, and the underlying sound that the letter represents. So you can teach phonics, but what happens with most children who are taught phonics is they're simply told that this visual thing, this letter, represents this auditory thing, this sound. Like, so the mother might say, or the teacher might say, okay, here's like the letter P, like in, you know, pom-pom. The problem with that explanation is if the child cannot discern that the P sound is the first part of the word pom-pom or pat or whatever, the explanation makes no sense whatever. None at all. So for the teacher, it makes perfect sense because, you know, she can read. But for the child, it's like, what are you talking about? And unfortunately, because people are not trained, teachers are not trained to go to that sublexical level and train it, then the connection between the letter and the sound is almost forever lost for that child. And so they get by because the brain is a wonderful thing and has millions and millions of neurons and accommodation pathways. So there, of course, you could learn to read words by, say, guessing at them, okay? Of course you can learn to read a few words by memorizing them, yes? So, but that's not what a good reader does.
Right.
A good reader understands and learns the relationship between the phonemes, the auditory we'll call it, the phonemic part, and the letters. But in our system, because of the way we teach, we first have the child identify the sounds. Once they can identify the sounds, then we can show them the usual letter that represents it, but we can also start showing them the options. And we do that very carefully. We don't overwhelm them. We show them step by step, you know, word by word.